All right, let's get started. Glad you're here. Hope your week's been going well. As we continue our series here on developing a unique family, a unique community, we have today, and then next Wednesday, and then the first Wednesday in June. I think that's right. First Wednesday in June, and then after that, open house for VBS. And then the following, the 16th or whatever that next Wednesday is we'll start summer series. And then everybody's in the auditorium and we have guest speakers. And well, I'm starting it. So I'll be speaking there the 16th. So, and then other guest speakers and so forth. So we're going to talk about kingdom. And I think it'll be a great summer series. Today we're actually at the last of the 10 Commandments. We're at commandment number 10. But the next couple classes, we're going to try to connect the dots on how all that is happening in Jesus, right? We're already making the bridge between those two, and today we're going to spend some time in Matthew. But the next couple, we're going to emphasize some things there, especially the idea of a priestly nation and how that is super cool. It continues on through Jesus and finds and how we have a role in that, but we'll wait to get to that then. So back to Exodus chapter 20. So once again, just to remind you, we're here at the 10 Commandments. That's kind of the heart of it. There's 613. We are at Mount Sinai. The 10 Commandments, remember, they're told here in Exodus 20. We're out there, Mount Sinai. And then Deuteronomy 5, which is about 40 years later when they're about to start transitioning into the promised land. And Moses kind of put some things together there and re-emphasizes a lot of things already said in the previous books here. But so the 10 Commandments, the heart of what the whole covenant that God enters in with Israel is about setting apart within a family, a broken family, humanity, what it looks like to be humanity done right. Okay? It's supposed to be a community within communities that follow their own gods, do things based on their own worldview, and it's a world of conflict, of tension, of abuse, of violence, of wars and all kinds of other things. Out of all that, what does it look like to pull out a remnant of that and gather around the exclusive presence of God? And they were to then be a community that interacted with themselves, that interacted with their neighbors in ways that reflected the presence of God. And they were to be set apart, so the idea of holy because of the presence of God. And they were to then be priestly by being intercessors between God and the broken world, and a broken world and God. And so we've been emphasizing that, but just to remind you. And so here they are at Mount Sinai, where God comes down from his cosmic realm, right, called the heavens. In ancient Near East. Once again, don't think of like the sky or birds or even the atmosphere. It's the cosmic realm of God. It's the heavens. And so God comes down from the heaven at Mount Sinai, which becomes there a connecting point between two worlds. Mount Sinai at that moment becomes a connecting point, a bridge between the heavens in this reality, earth. Okay, so the spiritual realm and the physical realm unite in that moment in time at Mount Sinai because God's presence is there. So then we have Moses, who becomes an intercessor, right? The folks are down there at the bottom in the world of chaos. And God comes down from his heavens and his heavenly realm. And Moses goes up to God, and there he is going to participate in that uniting of two worlds. And there he will get things of the heavens that are to bless the people, like the covenant, the law, the specifics for the tabernacle, blessings from God that are then to be shared with the people. Okay. The Ten Commandments are a part of that. Now, as all that's unfolding, what are the folks doing there at the bottom? By the way, Moses goes up half a dozen times, up and down, up and down. At one of those moments, the folks are making a mess of things, right? They're creating another god to go before them. They're molding a god to look like they done by their own hands. And so Moses comes down and breaks the Ten Commandments, and a bunch of other problems, punishments happen there. Okay, so here we are. The Ten Commandments. The first four have to do with their understanding and interaction with God, exclusively God, Yahweh God, Lord God. And then the next six have to do with their interaction with each other as a foundation for a community. Number 10, or verse 17 of chapter 20 in Exodus. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or his male or female servant, his ox or donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. In Deuteronomy, it's phrased slightly different, but the concept is the same. Don't covet. Don't want what's not yours. Now, if you're trying to think of a top 10, right, of how to do community right, I don't know. Why is that even on the list? The idea of coveting. The idea of coveting. Now, aren't there some other quote-unquote sins that might be more intense, more serious, that you might want to include there? But God finds it important to contemplate here this idea of not coveting. Right? So if you're being a community that is treating each other as a reflection of your understanding of God, of your relationship with God, you're treating each other as a reflection of the image of God, you are not to covet. Well, I don't know if you know much of history. Humanity's brutal. Humanity takes pick any 50 years of history. I was doing a little research. I'm trying to write a book, so pray for me there. I wrote a manuscript in Portuguese about 15 years ago, and then some things unfolded there that I ended up putting that the back burner. It's over Ecclesiastes. And so I finally thought, I'm going to start translating it, and maybe the last 15 years, a few more levels of experience that I can add to it, and hopefully maybe get it published. So I'm working on that. So I was making the point, one of the sentences there in Ecclesiastes, there's nothing new under the sun, which you're like, what? I mean, come on. We live in modern times where self-driving cars and toilet paper, like 3-ply, come on, that's one of the humanity's greatest advancements is 3-ply toilet paper, except when it goes missing during pandemic, which is, I'm still unsure why that happened. But, so there's all these amazing advancements in smartphones and artificial intelligence, and, I can talk to folks in Brazil. Surely we're better, different than, when ancient, ignorant, backwoods people lived, right? And they just got on a donkey and whatever else. Come on. So surely the world's better, different, and so forth. Well, so I did a little research. Genocides in the last 100 years. Oh, what a sad list. We're not talking about 5,000 years ago, where everybody was, backwards and ignorant and, No, like the last 50 years, there is so many genocides. And I don't just mean wars and fighting. I mean like brutal one group of people trying to annihilate the other group of people and take and, and all that. Well, sadly, that's not new under the sun. We can go to Micah. Let's go to Micah. I could pick just about any of the prophets, but Micah, I think, will be a good one to summarize this. Micah. Micah is living during the time of a handful of kings here, about 3 or 4, but especially around the time where Israel as the united tribes of Israel are not united. Okay, we have Saul, David, Solomon, the kingdom splits. And then we have 10 tribes up north, that's called Israel, 2 tribes down south called Judah. Samaria is the capital of Israel. Jerusalem's the capital of Judah. Okay. So Micah here kind of overlaps with Amos, with Isaiah, about 20, 30 years later, Jeremiah. Micah is in a time where he's predicting the destruction of Israel by the Assyrians and also looking ahead to predict the destruction of Jerusalem eventually by the Babylonians, which is also similar to what Isaiah does. So here's some of the things that Israel and Jerusalem, or Israel and Judah, Samaria, the capital, and Jerusalem, the capital, are doing wrong. Chapter 2, Micah chapter 2. Woe to those who plan iniquity, to those who plot evil on their beds. At morning's light they carry it out, because it is in their power to do it. So he's addressing the powerful, okay, which is often problematic. He's addressing the powerful. Chapter 2, verse 2. Here's part of their issues. They covet fields and they seize them, houses and they take them. They defraud people of their homes. They rob them of their inheritance. Therefore, the Lord says, what are these folks doing? Taking. They see things, they like it, they want it, they take it. Oh, humanity doesn't do that often, do we? About our last 50 years, we've taken things from different people groups and so forth. You just take. Now, of course, you validate reasons to take it, and the savages, or those people, the peasants, the ignorant, the barbarian, and you just go in and you take and you seize and you justify yourself for doing it. Here's what the Lord says, verse 3. I am planning disaster against this people, from which you cannot save yourselves. You will no longer walk proudly, for it will be a time of calamity. And that day people will ridicule you. They will taunt you with this mournful songs. And then he gives a little poetic song here. Maybe it sounds better in Hebrew, but we are utterly ruined. My people's possession is divided up. He takes it from me. He assigns our fields to traders. Like I said, I would try to sing that to you, but I don't know to what tune. So, verse 5, therefore you will have no one in the assembly of the Lord to divide the land by lot. In other words, everything you have, everything you took will be taken from you. And part of the problem was their business dealings, the way they were doing society. They were taking from the poor. They were taking from people that had less power or no influence that were beneath them. Which, come on, welcome to humanity. It's a continuous problem, and a problem that inevitably becomes a power play within a community. I want what you have, so somehow we're going to power play that and see who comes out with it. Well, let's go to, but this isn't just about stuff. That concept of coveting is a serious business. Matthew chapter 5. Let's go to another prophet Yeshua or Jesus. Prophet Jesus, Matthew chapter 5. Okay, you need to envision the setting here. This is brilliant. It's not random. We call this, Matthew 5, 6, and 7, the Sermon on the Mount. Right? Don't think like huge mountain, because there's no huge mountains there. It's more mountainous than, say, Oklahoma, or at least the part we live. But it's not like Colorado, okay? These some hills. But once again, in the ancient Near East, in the ancient world, the high places, and that's anything higher than normal, the high places where a lot of people put the sacrificial stuff, where they put the temples, where they put, idols and so forth, because that puts you closer to the world of the gods, the heavens. And through the narrative of the Bible, there's these key moments where the two worlds collide or come together. They find unity. And it's often in high places. Eden is described in a high place. Mount Sinai, high place. And here's Jesus at a high place. Jesus in Matthew is introduced as a new Moses. Now, it's much more subtle. Matthew doesn't just come out, Jesus is Moses, better. It's very subtle, the ways he does that, it's quite brilliant. But he's making the point to his Jewish audience that Jesus is the new Moses, is Moses fulfilled, where Moses was the shadow of one to come, that would speak the words of God, that would be from among the people. And Moses is saying this. You go back to Deuteronomy. And so Moses goes up to the high place, in that particular time, Mount Sinai, because God is there. Right? It's an access point to God. He goes up to the mountain, and there God reveals to him the covenant, the commandments, this way of being a community. And then he comes down from there only to find the people in a mess, and then punishment and death and, plague, and 3,000 are killed, and it's kind of an intense moment. Jesus here in Matthew is introduced as, like I said, in a subtle way, a Moses, the new Moses. And Matthew also mentions that Jesus is Emmanuel, God with us. So here's God with us, a new Moses, who's at a high place, who is expounding upon the will of God. In Jesus, he's reenacting here Mount Sinai. He's reenacting, speaking on behalf of God on how to be a community that's uniquely different, that is priestly in nature. The way Jesus puts it here in Matthew 4, verse 17, repent, for the kingdom of heaven is near. So the will of God from the heavenly realm is brought near to you because I am that connecting point. Jesus claims to be this new Mount Sinai experience. He claims to be a walking, connecting points of two worlds. That's why Jesus is God in the flesh. That's not random. It's a necessity of connecting these two worlds. And so here's Jesus, Mount Sinai experience. And what does he give out? What does this Ten Commandment-like idea is expressed in Matthew 5, 6, and 7? It's like the covenant restated. And in Matthew 5, he will say, I think it's 6 different times, you have heard it say, and then he's quoting something of the Old Testament, often out of the Ten Commandments. But I tell you, and then you got to plug in, he wants you to tap into all that, what the I means, Jesus, the new Moses, God with us, connecting point of two worlds, Israel done right, a new humanity, all that. Here's what I tell you, right? And so he talks about murder, he talks about divorce and oaths and eye for an eye, love your enemy. Here's where we're going to tap into our thou shalt not covenant. Chapter 5, verse 27. You have heard that it was said, you shall not commit adultery. Yeah, well, okay. Yes, we know that, right? The Ten Commandments. You shall not commit adultery. But I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. Now, we tapped into this when we were talking about the thou shalt not commit adultery. But I want to come back to it and emphasize a specific reason for this. So, the concept of adultery, right, it is you breaking the vows you have committed to your covenant partner. Right, you enter into a covenant, say like God in Israel, right? It's a covenant partnership. You enter into that covenant partnership, and if you are to be faithful to the covenant partnership you have as a people group with God, should you not be faithful to your covenant partnership with each other? Yes, the answer is yes. Yes, you should. Right? And the problem is, if you are not willing to be faithful to your covenant partnership, to the people you interact with on a day-to-day, like you see them, how prone are you, how much more likely are you to keep your covenant with God, which you don't see, which is, you can kind of more intellectualize, or it's out there somehow. So if you're willing to be unfaithful here, you're going to be unfaithful there. Because you're willing to be unfaithful there, you're unfaithful here. So there's that inevitable cause and effect between those two. Okay, so all that we've talked about and good. Jesus goes deeper. Deeper. It's not just about you literally going out with your cheating, or you run off with your neighbor's wife. The problem starts much, much sooner. It's the concept of, one of the things I do at OC, I do this chapel. It's called Faithfully Ever After. It's about relationships. I'm no expert, as Becky will easily attest. But we just don't do relationships well, especially teenagers, college students. Oh, God have mercy, right? We just don't do it well. There's so many stories I could tell you, many of which you probably already know, but we just don't. So I thought, let's at least talk about this in like a little group setting, and faith and the role of that, and kind of playing off, and they lived happily ever after, as if like the challenge is just to get to that I do moment. It's not, right? I mean, there's some challenge, a few challenges afterwards. We're happy, but I hear out there, it's challenging. Okay. Becky, no comments. So, I even got distracted here. Okay, so, where was I going with this? Oh, faithful ever after. All right, so one of the things we talk about there is the imagery of sowing. And the whole premise of that one conversation is, talk to me, what do you want to reap as you think about your life? So I start with that question. What do you want to reap when you think about your life? Especially, and people are like, I want to graduate. I want to, get a degree. I want to get a job. I want to find love. I want to be happy. Some of the stuff there. So it's like, oh, that's exciting. Yay, true love, happiness, okay, blissfulness. What are you sowing? Is really then the question. Whatever you want to reap, you must sow it. Right? I think that's intuitive for farming, except if you're one of those people that think all produce come from the grocery store. So Google that. It doesn't, right? There's other things happening. But so you have to, if you got to sow what you want to reap. If you want to have a happy marriage, what do you need to sow now when you're still single and can't even find a date? Like, what should you be sowing now that will eventually grow into a happy marriage? And what inevitably happens is we often don't think about what we're sowing. We just want to be happy somehow. And then 5 years later, 10 years later, there's all these weeds in our life. And we're like, how'd this get here? Well, it's been coming. And what Jesus is saying is just that. Adultery isn't, quote unquote, the problem. It is what has grown because of a problem. And the seed of the problem is what Jesus says, but I tell you, right? Don't commit adultery. That was from God. Don't. But let's back up, and I tell you the heart of it, the true seed of a society where you feel like you can break your covenant, your partnership covenant, and you can then help others break their partnership covenant. And basically, it's a society that you're living in distrust, where you're just doing whatever you want, is if anyone looks lustfully, okay, in a covetous way, wanting what's not theirs, he has already committed adultery with her in his heart. So once again, the seed of the problem is already happening. And who knows that that's happening? Occasionally you can look at people and they're so, undressing people with their eyes. You can get a sense of that, okay? But most often, come on, people don't walk around, lusting. It's not like a mood ring where you just, wouldn't that be something? You change colors. Oh. Yeah, so I got other jokes for that. I'll stop there. So it's just, it's in your heart. Oh, but what's the problem? I didn't run off with anybody. I'm not cheating on anybody. There's no victims. Well, Jesus disagrees. Jesus disagrees. Verse 29. If your right eye, here's his solution. If your right eye causes you to stumble, gouge it out and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to stumble, cut it off and throw it away, for it is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to go into hell. I think Jesus is serious about this, right? He uses this imagery here of cut your hand and, like this very gruesome, intense kind of imagery a couple, 2, 3 different times because he's making an important point. The point is that what is growing in you is destructive for the community, not just you. It's destructive for this new humanity that we're supposed to be. And it manifests itself in a lot of ways. I mean, here he's, talking about sexual, wanting and so forth. But what's the list there in Exodus 20? The idea of covet for stuff, things that aren't yours. Your the neighbor's wife, their land, their house, the lifestyle they have, the donkey. I think it's just talking about like the life they have. They have a newer model of donkey, and you have the old model of the donkey, and in the morning you got to go there and kind of kick the donkey, and their donkey's ready to go, and it's just a smoother ride, and your donkey's bumpy and so forth. So we're like, I want that, right? I want that. And so we compare, we measure, we contrast, we lust, we covet, we want. Is any of that happening today? I'm not like a technology hater and so forth, but social media. Oh, social media. Social media. One of the serious problems of social media, especially for the world of young folks, not that older, more mature people, if you're still trying to create, your little login in MySpace, this isn't an issue for you, right? You don't know, you don't even know what's going on. But social media, some of you don't even know what MySpace is. It's funny. Social media, you're just scrolling through posts. You just, I don't know, you got 5 minutes, you're in line, you're, I don't know, doing your morning routine in the bathroom. You just scrolling. And what are you looking? What are you seeing? What are you experiencing? But people putting out there the best versions of their life, real or imagined. And they're like putting the latest model of their new donkey, and all this stuff there. And you're just like, oh, I wish I had that donkey. They're just, and even when they're like posting like a struggle, or even posting they're trying to post and make a point of something that's not right on social media. People use filters. Are you all familiar with that? Okay, maybe I'm just old. But those filters, I want to put a post about this, but I hold myself back. filters don't make you look better. They make you look fake. Sometimes absurd, to an absurd amount of fake. Like scary fake. Like I have nightmares at your pretty post. Like you almost look like you've been possessed by the plastified demon of like, you know what I mean? Like the demon got in you and just stretched your face. You know, it is not pretty. You can see I have feelings about that, right? But then they'll say things like, #NoFilter, which they in reality spend like an hour kind of, you know, and delete. And okay, so you're still showing off. You're still doing stuff because of coveting. You see other people post it, and you want to post that too. And so we have negative feelings as we scroll through. And I found myself doing that. I'm like, oh, somebody's in Hawaii. You know, not to point at anybody or people that are going to Hawaii. You know. So, and I'm like, oh, good for you, you know. And maybe this is too much sharing. Let's move on. So, but it's a place that feeds and fuels and plays on coveting. And it like just sucks your soul. Because you're comparing and contrasting, like, oh, look, their husband, they seem happy. Why didn't my wife do this? Why didn't, you know? And it's just brutal. And it gnaws at society. It just eats at you. So Jesus is so intense about this, especially about the sexual part of it. And here's what he's saying. You might think there's no victim, right? You might think there's no victim. But what you're doing is taking. You want, so you take. Well, now, people don't want to just be taken, so you play that in your mind. You play the little movie in your mind where you're just using people lustfully for your sexual advantage, for your selfish pleasure desire. You just see and you start the little video in your head. Statistically, mostly a problem for men, and I think he addresses that because statistically, what gender has oppressed the other? Historically so. I mean, it's been a brutal historical issue. People using, taking, men, you know, using and abusing women, to different varieties of it. Well, sadly, statistically, women are trying to catch up on this issue. It's sad. It's sad. One of the things I require in a couple of my classes there in OC is, write me a spiritual journey paper, right? You know, they got to write something. It's either that or a research paper. If you think it's painful for you to write a research paper, it is torture for us to have to read them all. So a spiritual journey paper is at least more, you know, people's lives, and come on. And if you just make an effort, how can you, here's what I tell people. You tell me your story, just be real, make it 4 pages long. It's an A. Right, come on, how easier can that be? Because how lame must it be for a teacher to be like, oh yeah, your story kind of sucks, so C+, right? So you can't, yeah, your story is a little lame. No, I mean, we don't do that. So, but it's sad how often these young ladies are talking about how they're struggling with pornography and this mess. It's painful to even, like, don't catch up with us on that, right? Please, why do that? But it's just brutal that this is an issue. And it's you using and abusing people in your head. You just play the little video, and it's kind of like you do that whenever you want to. It's like, if people knew that what was going on in a lot of our heads, it would be a horrendous experience. People would run screaming. But we do this, and society fuels it, and society promotes it, and society even approves it, jokes about it, right? Sometimes even applauds it, uses of this sexuality thing to just sell anything, all the way from toothpaste to, some kind of buy a new car experience. I mean, it's just, it's a horrible thing, to the degree that Jesus says, you need to cut this off. You need to be that intentional about cutting whatever is leading you there. And think about, and he doesn't literally mean go pluck your eye out, right? Because inevitably, you lose both eyes. And I'll give you an example why that's really not what he's saying. Jerome, Saint Jerome. Anybody ever heard of Saint Jerome? He translated the Bible into Latin, into the vulgar Latin, or people considered it the vulgar Latin. So they called it the Folgate translation of Jerome. Okay, here's why he translated it. So Jerome had two main problems in his life that we can get from some of his writings and so forth. Two, he liked to read pagan authors, which are like, oh, what? But here's a man of faith who likes to read these pagan authors and stories and other concepts out there. So he felt deeply guilty about that. And two, he liked to go see nude women in Rome. That problem is old, right? So he would go to these places and had, naked women and so forth. So he was so ashamed of that, he thought, I'm going to move out to the desert. I'm going to literally get away from it. I will take none of that work. I will have no access to those, those places. So he literally moves out into podunk nowhere desert. And he's there for a couple years, almost dies. He's dehydrated, hallucinates. It's just kind of one of those survival shows. He's just out there, loses weight, almost dies. Here's what he found out. He still could see those nude women. Just in his head. Extremely disappointed. He just felt completely defeated. He comes back to Rome, goes to share there with a confidant, one of the bishops and so forth. And the bishop says, maybe you just need to focus on something positive. And so he starts to translate the entire Bible into common Latin. Here's what he found out. And obviously that's not Jesus' solution, just pluck your eye out. He could have plucked both of his eyes out in the desert and still wouldn't have solved the problem. But what Jesus is saying is you have to be that radical. The sentiment was right for Jerome. His application of it wasn't productive. But he was willing to be that radical to remove himself to extreme circumstances to get away from it. And what Jesus is saying, we have to do that in our hearts. We have to do that, whatever is getting us to this mess, we have to be that intentional to remove ourselves. Because here's the cost otherwise. You will burn in hell. Here's what I don't think he's saying. I don't think he just means one of these days you're literally going to be in the afterlife. You're going to be in hell. Satan poking you with a stick for all eternity, right? There's an element of eternity here, but he's talking about you will live in this hell that you're promoting. Your life now will be hellish because that is what you're fueling in your heart, hellish things. To covet is to be hellish. You're not promoting a community, a divine community. You're not promoting a humanity that reflects heavenly access because of God's presence. What you are promoting in a world where you can covet and sometimes take, either in your mind or literally like we were reading in Micah, just, I want that land, and you find ways to take over it. You're promoting a community of hell. But here, it's not just the other side of eternity. Whatever's going to be there is going to be, it's going to be the fulfillment of the hellish existence that we live here in part, often by our own doing. So there are victims. First of all, you. You're experiencing a hellish concept. You see, you want, you take. And the inevitable consequences are things like you take people's land. You create a society where the mighty rule over the weak, where those in power take from those that have none. You create a society where you can run off with your neighbor's wife. You create a society where you just murder, where you commit adultery and then you murder. Anybody remember a story like that? David, right? Here's David, supposed to be ruling in a way that reflects the presence of God. Where is he at? At a high place, which is supposed to be a place, the concept of you're supposed to be connected to God. You're at a high place. And what is he doing from that vantage point? Connecting with God? No. Looking to use and abuse people. So he manipulates, he takes, he abuses, he oppresses Bathsheba, and then he finds a way to kill her husband. Not just her husband. He had people put up the front line there. Others died too because he's just trying to hide the mess. Where did that start? In his heart. Is that not a hellish world? So a lot of the hell we live now, it's in part because we covet. So I think that's why the 10th commandment, kind of closing that is, don't live a hellish community. Don't take, don't use, don't abuse, don't oppress, don't sexualize people, don't objectify people. It's hell on earth. So instead of you burning in that reality now, and possibly on the other side of eternity, you got to get rid of stuff. Maybe it is you need to get rid of your smartphone for one of those dumb phones. You know what I'm talking about? A little flip phone. My favorite phone ever was a little tiny one. It just flip, antenna. I felt like Star Trek. It was just, maybe you need to go back to one of those phones. Maybe you need I don't know. But take it seriously. Because the seeds you're planting now, what you're sowing now, will grow into that hellish existence that he's talking about. Here and possibly beyond. So a community that reflects the exclusive presence of God is one that does not covet. So the next couple classes, once again, we're going to dive deeper into the concept of priest. It's really cool. I hope I do it justice. It's really, really cool how it goes from what God is. Adam and Eve have a priestly role, and it finds that all the way in Jesus and then us as a family of believers. So thanks for being here. See you in the next couple classes.